Tonight's headlines: powerful snow and ice storm affects millions. Feds surprisingly say no to United Airlines bailout. Iraq accuses inspectors of provoking war. Also tonight, how drug companies can target you with misleading ads while federal regulators do nothing. Eye on America. Dozens of children have been killed by SUVs because the driver just couldn't see them. And a crime of historic proportions. Someone stole a dinosaur.
This is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather reporting from CBS News headquarters in New York.
Good evening. For much of the country, this is a night to stay home. There is dangerous weather outside. A storm is bringing a mix of ice, freezing rain, and snow from Texas all the way east to Virginia, and it is not going to stop there. The forecast calls for the storm to move up the East Coast tomorrow, through the mid-Atlantic states, and right on into New England. Many roads are very slippery and dangerous tonight, as these late pictures from around the region show you. The storm has already been blamed for at least 5 deaths. Nearly a dozen states were forced to close schools, including North Carolina. CBS News correspondent Mark Strassman is there. Mark?
Dan, in Charlotte and across the Mid-South, tonight's rush hour commute is much more treacherous than usual. Winter's icy grip has arrived early. Wintry misery, snow, sleet, and freezing rain punished a third of America today. From this whiteout in Missouri to blackouts in Arkansas and Tennessee, leaving thousands without power. This fast-moving system that dumped up to 10 inches of floodwater on Houston overnight, by today, had put out millions of people into the snow season's first significant blast.
It pays to be cautious because it's, wet and a little slippery, but watch out for the other guy.
Driving was treacherous in stretches of Kentucky and North Carolina. There were dozens of fender benders, and at least 2 deaths were blamed on slick roads. In many communities, the icy danger is just beginning.
Some places are getting heavy precipitation. Some are getting icing, significant amounts of icing. Other places will get snow in the order of 2 to 4 to 6 inches or more.
In this fast-moving, vigorous storm, 2 air masses are colliding. Warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico running into a wide swath of cold air that has been hovering over the eastern United States. It's a perfect storm for early winter weather. In the Carolinas, hardest hit was the I-85 corridor between Charlotte and Greensboro. Temperatures dipped below freezing. Southern discomfort came on ice. Roads became rinks. Every salt truck in Charlotte City fleet is in service round the clock.
People are just in a hurry. They want to get out and go, so we do expect some accidents out there.
And you have to hope that the freezing rain gives you as much of a break as possible.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Flights across the southeast were delayed for hours or canceled. Another worry into the rainy night is heavy ice downing power lines, potentially leaving thousands in the dark and cold. This storm system will reform overnight and swing northeast. Tomorrow, heavy snow and ice should find Washington, Philadelphia, and parts of New England. Dan?
Mark Strassman on the dangerous storm watch in Charlotte, North Carolina. The U.S. airline industry is going through heavy financial turbulence, and United Airlines may not make it through. CBS News business correspondent Anthony Mason reports the government has just turned down the airline's plea for taxpayer help.
Bankruptcy now looks all but certain for the nation's second largest airline. The government today refused to bail out United with a $1.8 billion loan guarantee. The airline is losing $7 million a day, and it's not alone trying to navigate the not-so-friendly skies.
How much trouble is the industry in?
The airline industry in the U.S. today is facing its worst financial crisis in its history.
U.S. Airways is already in bankruptcy, and collectively, American carriers are expected to lose $9 billion this year.
September 11th is partly to blame. Air travel has never fully recovered, and passenger traffic is still down more than 10% from its peak 2 years ago.
But the biggest problem for the old airlines are the new discount carriers like Southwest and JetBlue, which are slowly taking over the airways.
Well, they've increased their market share by 25% in the last 3 years.
Offering cheaper fares by cutting labor costs. While United, for example, pays its pilots $863 per flight hour, JetBlue pays less than half of that. And Southwest Airlines has cut out feather bedding for its pilots.
They get paid 85 hours, then they fly 85 hours. And United's pilots get paid for 85 and fly 50.
The recession was the last straw, and Aviation Week's Anthony Veloci says it's become restructure or die for the major carriers.
Are they dinosaurs?
They're dinosaurs in their present form. They're going to have to adapt to a new environment very quickly.
And some of them won't make it.
Some of them probably will not make it.
United, once the world's largest airline, is now the industry's biggest money loser, and whether it can survive is still up in the air. Anthony Mason, CBS News, New York.
A church financial committee tonight gave the Roman Catholic Archbishop of Boston permission to take an unprecedented step to file for bankruptcy on behalf of the archdiocese, which faces potentially crippling sexual abuse lawsuits. The Vatican would have to approve the bankruptcy filing. It would give a secular court control of church finances. In Iraq today, aggressive actions by United Nations weapons hunters touched a nerve. Saddam Hussein's vice president angrily denounced the inspectors as spies for the CIA and Israel's Mossad. Their purpose, he said, is to provoke Iraqi resistance and give the United States an excuse for war. CBS's Mark Phillips in Baghdad is covering the showdown with Saddam.
Another showdown loomed today as weapons inspectors rolled into the Al-Muthanna chemical weapons death factory deep in the Iraqi desert. Here, destroyed equipment which once produced some of the most lethal chemical agents known, mustard gas, sarin, nerve gas, sits as testimony to the lies Iraq has told in the past. The equipment was wrecked by Gulf War bombing and later by the UN after Iraq had insisted for years it was doing no such work here. Now, according to the U.S. view, Iraq is about to lie again, putting this entire inspection process on a knife edge. In its full disclosure statement this weekend, Iraq said today it will deny possessing any of the outlawed weapons the U.S. insists it has.
Because really we have no weapons of mass destruction. We have absolutely no weapon of mass destruction.
The inspectors privately admit a 000 declaration, referring to chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons, would severely test American patience with the inspection process, requiring months of playing the hidden weapons shell game the Iraqis are so good at. The UN actually did find some old mustard gas containers today, which they had identified last time but not destroyed. Their equipment destroyed in the Gulf War or decommissioned by the UN since, the Iraqis claim these bases are now out of business. They seem confident that bases which have been visited in the past will be inspected again, and equally confident that nothing incriminating will be found in places like this. Under great pressure to intensify its inspections, the UN will now actually have to take a 2-day break, while Iraq shuts down for the Muslim end of Ramadan holiday. Mark Phillips, CBS News, Al-Muthanna, Iraq.
If Iraqi anger leads to obstruction of the inspection process, it could be enough to trigger a war. But there is concern in some quarters, both here and abroad, that President Bush is pushing too hard in that direction and too fast with too little reason. CBS News Chief White House correspondent John Roberts has some perspective tonight in this looming war reality check.
On Monday, President Bush delivered this ominous assessment of Saddam's willingness to comply with weapons inspections.
So far, the signs are not encouraging.
Tuesday, the UN Secretary General appeared to disagree. Iraq is doing just fine so far, he said. And today, the president clarified his remarks, saying he wasn't assessing the inspections, just Saddam's overall record of deceit.
We've been doing this for 5 days after 11 years of deception and deceit. The process is just beginning.
If it is too early to assess how inspections are going, why is the president talking so tough while the United Nations seems willing to give Saddam a break?
His skepticism is based on 11 years of empirical evidence and behavior from Saddam Hussein, in which he violated United Nations resolutions and did everything he could to thwart the inspectors.
While that skepticism is understandable, and while conflict may one day be unavoidable, says former National Security Council analyst Ken Pollack, Mr. Bush is moving far too quickly.
going to war against Saddam Hussein could create as many problems as it eliminates. And therefore, before we go to war with Iraq, something that I believe is unfortunately going to be necessary, we want to make sure that we've done as much as we can to minimize all of those potential problems.
One of those emerging problems is a split in world opinion over war with Iraq. Russia and India today sharply warned President Bush against unilateral action. A new international poll from the Pew Center out today found the overwhelming majority of people in France, Germany, and Russia are opposed to joining a war against Saddam, and that America's favorability rating is slipping dramatically among major Muslim allies Turkey, Jordan, Egypt, and Pakistan.
The administration did take another step back from war today. The Deputy Secretary of Defense assuring allies in Europe that even if Iraq were to file a false declaration of its weapons programs this weekend, that wouldn't trigger a war. But it certainly would be another step down the road to military action. Dan?
Reporting live from the White House, John Roberts. Coming up next on the CBS Evening News, misleading drug ads. They can hook you without telling you the risks. Why can't regulators keep them off the air? Congressional investigators reported today that the Food and Drug Administration is too slow to take action against misleading drug advertisements. The report says such ads and commercials often run their course before regulators issue protests to the advertisers. CBS's Cheryl Atkinson has more on the drug companies' misleading marketing.
The nasal congestion.
It's ads like this that send an estimated 8 million Americans a year running to their doctors, asking for specific drugs.
Ask your doctor about.
But the new congressional report says many consumers are getting a dose of bad information along the way.
We rely on these ads to tell us what the risks are and what the benefits are. And people are now taking drugs they don't need. They're taking drugs that may be bad for them.
The list of violators warned by the FDA in recent years includes some of the biggest names in the medicine cabinet. Glaxo welcomed for a Flonase nasal spray ad that was misleading and provided no risk information at all. Merck, makers of the popular pain reliever Vioxx, was warned for minimizing potentially serious cardiovascular findings. The drug maker Zeneca got cited for putting out misleading information on 5 different drugs at the same time. Repeat offenders include the makers of Vioxx, the pain reliever Celebrex, and the diabetes drug Avandia, all told in separate FDA warning letters that their violations are particularly troublesome because we have previously objected to the same problems. The industry group Pharma defends direct-to-consumer drug ads, saying they educate the public and get patients to doctors for treatment. Also, that only a small percentage of ads ever get warnings from the FDA.
The congressional report also says it takes the FDA so long to issue warnings, the ads have often been replaced by newer ones anyway. And the whole process got even slower this year when the FDA began giving warnings a more vigorous legal review before they're sent out, delaying them by weeks, while millions of consumers may be seeing the suspect ads. Dan?
Live in Washington, Cheryl Atkinson, thanks. Sky gazers in southern Africa and Western Australia were treated to a full solar eclipse today. Where skies were clear, those equipped with protective eyewear enjoyed a celestial spectacular. The moon's disk moved over the face of the sun, darkness descended in daytime, and the solar corona emerged, glowing against the midnight black sky. One Australian observer declared it was the most amazing 30 seconds of his life. Coming up next on the CBS Evening News, Eye on America. The bigger the SUV, the bigger the potentially deadly blind spot, deadly for children.
Physical training, it's a big part of preparing for war. But over 30 service personnel died after using a popular diet drug. The military banned the stuff, but your government says it's still okay for you to buy it. What's going on? Also, everybody has a story, even this 4-year-old. Tomorrow on the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather.
President Bush today signed 2 new laws aimed at creating a safer environment for children. The first will set up an internet domain for children under 13 only, free of adult material. The other law requires car makers to install shoulder belts for children in the rear middle seats. The shoulder belt law helps make children safer inside the car, but there's a danger to children outside some vehicles. All too often, drivers of SUVs and big pickup trucks backing up at the slowest of speeds, never even see the child behind them, as Jane Clayson reports in tonight's Eye on America.
Pediatrician Dr. Greg Gulbranson knows more than most about child safety, which is one reason he purchased a big, sturdy sport utility vehicle.
I bought that car because it was the safest thing to do for my family.
Until one night when Dr. Gulbranson was slowly, carefully backing his car into the garage.
I know I looked in those rearview mirrors, and I know I looked over my shoulder.
He never saw his 2-year-old son, Cameron.
And there he was at the end of the driveway. I knew. Just ran him over. I never saw him. There was no way I was going to see that guy. Just no way.
57 children have already lost their lives the same way this year. And more than half of those accidents involved SUVs or large pickup trucks, simply because...
Can you see anything back there?
I can see nothing. The bigger the vehicle and the higher the rear window, the bigger the blind spot behind it. Those orange cones are the height of a 2-year-old child.
When I was sitting in that car, I couldn't see the cones through the rearview mirror, through the side mirrors, or through the back.
No.
And that's the basic problem.
That's the basic problem.
Consumer Reports auto testing director David Champion found that in a mid-size passenger vehicle, the average blind spot goes back about 10 feet. In an SUV, it extends to more than 14 feet. And in a pickup, the so-called dead zone doubles to more than 30 feet.
In most cases, the family sedan or family station wagon, it might not have the charisma of a large SUV, but it's a lot safer.
No one knew how many children were dying in these back-over accidents because no federal agency keeps track of them. It took a group of parents to uncover the risk.
This truly is an epidemic.
Jeanette Fennell, who runs a nonprofit child safety group, started noticing increasing numbers of back-over accidents 3 years ago.
People kind of want to call it a freak accident, and I'm here to tell you it's not freak and it's not an accident. These are predictable and preventable tragedies.
Car companies won't comment on the accidents, but they are starting to offer sensors on the back bumpers of some new models. They're rarely standard equipment, and they're never promoted as a child safety device. Dr. Gulbranson believes sensors definitely would have saved his son, Cameron.
I think about, if I had only done it differently, had I only, had a sensor or something like that, if I only...
Cameron Gulbranson died in his parents' driveway, part of a hidden tragedy that's now claiming at least one child a week. In Woodbury, New York, Jane Clayson for Eye on America.
Coming up next on the CBS Evening News, poached dinosaurs. It's a theft of prehistoric treasures. We end tonight with a very unusual crime scene investigation. The scene is somewhere in the middle of nowhere. And the crime, as CBS's Sandra Hughes reports, was the theft of a priceless piece of history.
Surrounded by towering Utah bedrock miles from the nearest real road,
Say stone.
The FBI is tracking a criminal.
What is the FBI doing in a place like this?
The FBI is here to collect evidence of a crime. It's like any other crime. It could be a murder scene, it could be a bombing.
But in this case, the victim is more than 150 million years old. A dinosaur, its skeleton stolen for profit.
We're not just looking for bones, we're looking for pop cans, beer cans.
Clues which could lead to the poachers who stole the bones. Fossil theft is a growing criminal industry fueled by affluent collectors and amateur poachers who dig on government land, making it a federal offense.
As part of the bone structure of what we're looking at.
And so it would appear that poachers came in here and just did a hack job.
Correct.
The source of that bone may have been a complete dinosaur skeleton that was broken up in little chunks, sold for a few dollars a piece so that someone could have a souvenir.
It was in a remote Utah high desert just like this where the dinosaur team solved its biggest case, digging up evidence that led to a local poacher and ultimately the Pennsylvania fossil dealer who hired him.
The FBI went all the way to Japan to track the Allosaurus skeleton sold for $400,000 to a museum. They still have the evidence that closed the case.
A Coke can, a Pepsi can, a hammer. What kind of evidence is this that can lead you to a criminal?
It's great evidence. A paleontologist would never use a tool like this.
But a poacher would, and collectors are willing to pay hundreds, even thousands of dollars on the internet for a fragment of a dinosaur bone, or millions for an entire skeleton.
The loss of even a single skeleton is a dramatic loss to the science and to the public.
That's why Congress has proposed stiffer penalties for poachers, and the FBI is out in this desolate desert, tracking down criminals before they make dinosaur history extinct. Sandra Hughes, CBS News, Fremont Junction, Utah.
What's next? And that's part of our world tonight. I'll be back very shortly here on CBS with 60 Minutes 2.
How many wives can this king have? As many as he wants. But wife number 10 is giving him problems he didn't expect. And it's a daring transplant operation. But no one expected this man would die trying to save his brother.
60 Minutes 2, tonight at 8, 7 Central. For the CBS Evening News, Dan Rather reporting. Back in a few on 62.
For news 24 hours a day, go to cbsnews.com. AOL keyword CBS News.